I would like to invite you to try the coffee I prepared specifically for you. My husband James inquired with a peculiar smile that did not fully convey sincerity. I was seated at the elegant dining table of my sister-in-law Nina's residence in Nashville, where we convened for our monthly family brunch. The coffee cup positioned before me emitted an unusual, nearly metallic odor that caused a sense of unease in my stomach. My name is Christina, and at the age of 29, I never anticipated that I would find myself questioning whether my husband was attempting to harm me. After 3 years of marriage and numerous instances of unintentional food poisoning, I had become increasingly cautious, particularly in relation to Nina. She possessed a talent for orchestrating circumstances that resulted in my discomfort or humiliation, consistently accompanied by the same innocent smile that James is currently displaying. I expressed my gratitude, maintaining a composed demeanor while my thoughts were in turmoil. The fragrance emanating from the cup was distinct from any coffee I had previously encountered. It brought to mind the incident from last month when I required urgent care following my visit to Nina's house, where I had consumed tea. The physicians were unable to provide an explanation for my symptoms, and Nina maintained that she had prepared the tea in the same manner as she did for herself. Nina observed me closely from across the table, absent-mindedly stirring her own untouched coffee. James has recently developed impressive barista skills, she remarked with a smile. He has been refining various brewing techniques specifically for your benefit. The manner in which she emphasized her point was quite impactful. I have observed that James has been spending an increased amount of time at Nina's residence recently, stating that they are organizing a surprise for our forthcoming anniversary. However, there was a sense that something was amiss. The hushed discussions that ceased upon my arrival, the unusual messages I observed on his phone, and now this coffee with its distinctive aroma. I raised the cup, feigning a sip as I observed their expressions closely. James and Nina shared a brief glance that validated my suspicions. I stood up abruptly, feigning a check of my phone. Oh, please take a moment to observe that. I need to make a brief business call. Nina, would you be agreeable to my utilizing your study? As I passed by Nina's place setting, I intentionally stumbled, promptly exchanging our coffee cups amidst the commotion of regaining my balance. I sincerely apologize, I stated, adjusting my posture. I occasionally find myself being quite clumsy. Nina dismissed my apology with a constrained smile. Please take care to prevent any damage to the study. I acknowledged and quickly departed, my heart racing. From the entrance to the study, I was still able to observe them at the table. I now needed to wait and observe. From the study doorway, I observed Nina raise the coffee cup to her lips, and a sense of anxiety tightened in my stomach. A portion of me felt compelled to intervene and caution her, however. I recognized the necessity of uncovering the truth. I have spent an excessive number of nights in emergency rooms and endured countless hours in discomfort, consistently following meals shared with them. The situation has not always been this way. Upon my initial encounter with James at a friend's wedding in Nashville 3 years ago, he exhibited charm and attentiveness. Nina appeared to be welcoming as well, extending invitations to family gatherings and offering assistance in planning our wedding. Upon reflection, I realized that I should have been more attentive to the warning signs. Her tendency to inadvertently spill substances on my dress during significant events, as well as the consistent addition of extra seasoning to my food when she assisted in cooking, were notable occurrences. The incident began with minor symptoms, including a slight upset stomach and a mild allergic reaction. James consistently presented a rationale for his actions. Perhaps something you consumed earlier is causing your discomfort. Or perhaps you are experiencing the onset of an illness. However, the pattern was becoming increasingly evident. 2 months ago, I experienced a serious incident that resulted in my hospitalization following a breakfast at their residence. The medical professionals discovered traces of an unidentified substance in my system, however. James persuaded everyone that I must have ingested some expired medication. I held onto the doorframe, observing as Nina took another sip of her coffee. James was typing on his phone, seemingly oblivious to his surroundings. James left the untouched cup cold on the table. The metallic odor persisted in my nostrils, causing a shudder to run through me. A subtle tremor in Nina's hand drew my attention. She placed the cup down, her complexion abruptly turning pale. "James," she stated, her voice trembling, "there appears to be an issue." James raised his gaze, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he recognized the cup from which she was drinking. He abruptly stood up, causing his chair to topple over. "Nina, could you please provide an update on the current situation?" Nina's hands were shaking noticeably at this point. "I do not. I believe." She attempted to stand but faltered, grasping the edge of the table for stability. "James, could you please clarify what ingredients you added to that coffee?" I exited the study, with my phone already in recording mode. James stood next to Nina, his expression pale. "That was not intended to be your cup," he whispered, yet in the quiet of the dining room, his words resonated distinctly. Nina's eyes widened with a combination of realization and apprehension. She gasped and fell to the floor, urgently calling for an ambulance. "I am unable to comply with this request." I promptly dialed 911, maintaining composure despite the chaos occurring around me. Nina was now on the floor, her body experiencing intense tremors. James knelt beside her, a look of panic evident on his face as he recognized that their plan had failed dramatically. "Are emergency services available? We require an ambulance at 1542 Maple Grove Drive." I have clearly communicated this while recording the conversation with my other hand. "My sister-in-law seems to be experiencing a significant reaction to an ingredient in her coffee. The patient is alert but exhibiting tremors." While I was conversing with the dispatcher, Nina maintained direct eye contact with me. Genuine fear replaced the typical cold calculation in her gaze. "Christina," she exclaimed, "have you made a change? Were you aware? The dispatcher has confirmed that the ambulance is en route." "Ma'am, kindly remain on the line." James was becoming increasingly agitated with each passing moment. "Nina, could you please provide an update on the situation? That was not intended to. It was not intended for." "Please be quiet, James," Nina said through clenched teeth, her frustration briefly overshadowing her concern. "The responsibility for this situation lies with you. You indicated that it would only cause her sufficient illness to be unable to attend the board meeting next week. You assured me that it would remain untraceable." I experienced a sudden chill. The board meeting was the occasion for my presentation of a proposal concerning a significant client account, which had been the focus of Nina's efforts for several months at our competing firms. Everything began to align effectively. "Last month, I mentioned the tea," my voice surprisingly steady. "The breakfast incident that occurred 2 months ago is still fresh in my memory. Those incidents were not coincidental, were they?" Nina's expression twisted in response to another surge of discomfort. "Despite the tea's intended purpose of encouraging you to stay at home during the Johnson contract presentation, you chose to attend." She grasped her abdomen, bending at the waist. "James stated that our objective was to discredit you and create the impression among clients that you were unreliable." The sound of sirens resonated in the atmosphere outside. James rose to his feet and stepped back from both of us. "Nina, please refrain from speaking. Your statements lack clarity and accuracy," Nina asserted with a slight slur in her speech. "I am fully aware of what I am stating. We have been strategizing for several months, particularly since Christina began to consistently excel in every client meeting. It was your responsibility to ensure that she consumed it today." The paramedics entered through the front door promptly, and I moved aside to allow them to perform their duties effectively. As the medical team loaded Nina onto a stretcher, I ceased recording and promptly sent the video to my private email, followed by forwarding it to my attorney. James remained motionless, observing as his meticulously devised plan disintegrated before him. "I will accompany her to the hospital," I informed the paramedics, my tone resolute. "It is essential to ensure that my sister-in-law receives the appropriate treatment." I encountered James's fearful expression, and I am confident that the medical professionals will be quite interested in determining the exact contents of that coffee. The emergency department at Nashville General Hospital was bustling with activity as medical professionals swiftly attended to Nina's needs. I remained seated in the waiting room, holding my phone in my hand as I listened to the recording of Nina's confession repeatedly. The quiver in her voice and the distress evident in her eyes provided sufficient evidence to confirm that this was not merely a product of my imagination. We have contacted the family of Nina Anderson, a nurse. I stood up, observing James's noticeable absence. He mentioned that he parked the car approximately 20 minutes ago and has not yet returned. I am her sister-in-law, I stated, as I accompanied the nurse through the double doors. How is she doing? We have stabilized her, however. We have detected concerning levels of toxins in her system. The nurse's expression was serious. The physician wishes to discuss some atypical results observed in her blood work. Dr. Phillips, a distinguished woman with graying hair and keen eyes, was waiting by Nina's room. Mrs. Bennett, could you please provide a detailed account of the events leading up to your sister-in-law's illness? I inhaled deeply and retrieved my phone. I recommend that you consider this information first. I reviewed the recording from brunch. Observing the doctor's expression transition from professional concern to alarm, she stated that this matter is of extreme seriousness while taking notes on her tablet. The substance we discovered is not a contaminant that would inadvertently be present in coffee. We are examining the possibility of intentional contamination. At that moment, James emerged at the end of the hallway, his complexion notably pale and glistening with sweat. It was evident that he had overheard the doctor's remarks. He began, "Christina," and took a step toward me. "I would like to provide an explanation." Dr. Phillips cautioned to maintain distance while activating the nurse's call button. "Please dispatch security to room 412. James raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. This situation appears to be a misunderstanding. Nina experienced confusion. She was uncertain about her statements. Is that so? I accessed the messages I had found on his phone last week, which I had discreetly forwarded to myself. The correspondence between you and Nina regarding ensuring her unavailability prior to the Henderson presentation was merely a casual exchange. His complexion lost its color. Did you access my phone? Yes. I did discover the unusual pills in your desk drawer. I consulted Dr. Phillips. Doctor, I have experienced 3 hospital admissions in the past 6 months due to unexplained symptoms. I would like to inquire whether the findings align with what you discovered in Nina's system today. The physician's gaze became more focused. It will be necessary to conduct several tests for comparison purposes. Security will ensure that your husband is accessible for questioning. 2 security personnel arrived and took their positions on either side of James. He appeared to be in a state of entrapment. As his meticulously crafted facade began to deteriorate, "Nina and I are currently working together." He exhibited signs of hesitation in his speech. "Our intention was to assist you in moderating your pace. You were exerting considerable effort by managing all the major clients. Nina suggested that it would be beneficial for you to take some time off." Was she trying to poison me? My voice remained steady, despite my hands trembling with anger. "What is the duration of your experience in this field? Were you the individual who interfered with my food at the Christmas party as well?" James's silence provided the response I required. In the background, I observed Nina's room, where she was connected to several monitors. Her previous confidence had diminished, supplanted by the apprehension of an individual who recognized that their plans had ultimately been uncovered. "Detective Mendoza is en route," Dr. Phillips stated quietly. "She will seek to obtain statements from all parties involved." I acknowledged the situation, experiencing an unusual sense of tranquility. There was no turning back as the truth finally came to light. Detective Mendoza arrived promptly within the hour, her presence commanding attention in the sterile hospital corridor. She was an experienced investigator specializing in domestic abuse cases, and she attentively listened as I played the recording from brunch and presented the text messages. Mrs. Bennett stated while reviewing her notes that you indicated prior hospitalizations. Could you please provide further details regarding those incidents? I retrieved my phone once more and accessed a document I had been diligently updating for several months. The initial occurrence took place in February following a dinner at Nina's residence. I experienced significant abdominal discomfort accompanied by dizziness. The second occurrence took place in April, involving the tea incident, followed by an event in June after breakfast with them. I maintained a steady tone as I proceeded. The symptoms presented consistently. yet exhibited slight variations that prevented the physicians from identifying a definitive cause. The detective's gaze intensified as she examined my comprehensive log of dates, symptoms, and circumstances. Have you been maintaining records? I have noticed a consistent pattern. I paused before retrieving another phone from my purse. I have also begun to carry a backup phone with an alternate number. I utilized it to document conversations during my interactions with them. There are multiple instances in which Nina and James engage in discussions regarding their plans, although they exercise caution to remain non-explicit. In one of the recordings, Nina's voice was distinctly audible. The Henderson account holds a value in the millions. James, we must ensure that she does not jeopardize our achievements. Please adhere to the established plan. A brief period of illness should suffice. James's response was similarly critical. I have a more robust option this time. She will not be able to attend the presentation. Detective Mendoza's demeanor became resolute as she listened. From the vantage point of Nina's room, I observed that my sister-in-law was now awake, appearing notably less assured than she had during brunch. The detective informed me that the hospital is conducting toxicology screenings. Dr. Phillips has discovered numerous substances that are not present in nature. We will also require samples from your residence. A disturbance in the hallway drew our attention. James and the security personnel were having a heated discussion, with James's voice growing more urgent. I need to speak with my wife, he stated emphatically. Christina, I believe there may be a misunderstanding. Our intentions were to ensure your protection. Detective Mendoza positioned himself between us. Mr. Bennett, your actions are not contributing positively to your situation. We have already identified evidence of premeditation. Was this premeditated? James emitted a laugh, a hollow sound that reverberated through the corridor. Our intention was to moderate her pace. She was exerting herself excessively by managing all the major accounts. Nina expressed that it would be beneficial for her to take some time off. Could someone have poisoned her? Detective Mendoza's voice was incisive. Mr. Bennett, what you are describing is not protection, it is attempted murder. James's complexion paled significantly. Homicide? That is not correct. We did not intend to. Could you please clarify your intended actions? I inquired, my tone unexpectedly composed. Could you please clarify what the intended outcome was when you added something to my coffee this morning? James's silence conveyed a significant message. Behind him, I observed Nina observing through her hospital room window. Her expression was a blend of apprehension and contemplation. I contemplated whether she was attempting to rationalize her actions, to justify months of systematic poisoning as a misguided effort to assist me. Detective Mendoza instructed the security personnel to collect both of their phones and requested that officers be stationed at each entrance. We require all individuals to stay until we obtain the toxicology results. Dr. Phillips entered Nina's room holding a tablet, her expression serious as she examined the test results. Detective Mendoza and I proceeded, while James stayed outside with the security personnel. Nina attempted to adjust her posture in the hospital bed, however. The tremors had not fully diminished. Dr. Phillips announced that the toxicology report indicates elevated levels of several substances, her tone reflecting a clinical demeanor. The presence of a specific compound commonly utilized in pharmaceutical testing is particularly concerning. This information should not be accessible to the general public. Nina's complexion became noticeably pale. That is not feasible. James indicated that it was merely an issue that would result in mild symptoms. Are there any mild symptoms present? Detective Mendoza interjected, retrieving her notebook. Is this similar to the experiences your sister-in-law has encountered over the past 6 months? A detective entered as the door opened, carrying an evidence bag. During our investigation, we discovered several small bottles with clinical labels in Mr. Bennett's office desk at the Anderson marketing firm. He reported this finding, accompanied by detailed notes regarding dosages and reactions. I experienced a moment of weakness as I comprehended the entirety of their plan. Were you documenting all the details? Is this akin to an experiment? Nina protested, asserting that it was not the case, though her voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. It was essential for us to monitor the effectiveness of our strategies. The initial attempts did not yield satisfactory results. You continued to attend meetings regardless. Detective Mendoza concluded his examination of the bottles, noting an increase in the dosages. It is important to note that these substances can be lethal when present in higher concentrations. The room became quiet. James, still observable through the window, settled into a chair in the hallway, resting his head in his hands. I purposefully stated the Henderson account. As the details started to align coherently, the matter extended beyond the presentation. Did it not? You required my permanent removal from the situation due to the client's explicit request for my leadership role. Nina's expression reflected a complex interplay of anger and fear. Your actions were detrimental to the situation. I dedicated several years to developing that client portfolio. And then you arrived, resulting in a shift in interest toward collaborating with you instead. James indicated that he would be able to resolve the issue. Could I end my life? The words lingered in the atmosphere, laden with implication. Our intention was not to. Nina began to speak, however. Dr. Phillips interrupted her. The doctor stated, looking directly at Nina, that the concentration in the coffee she consumed today was significantly higher than the previous samples analyzed from Mrs. Bennett's earlier hospital visits. The consequences of her consumption would have been severe, potentially resulting in fatality. Detective Mendoza addressed the other officer. A comprehensive warrant will be required for both their residences and workplaces, as well as communication with the pharmaceutical company identified on these bottles. Examine the methods used to obtain these substances. Nina reclined against her pillows, the determination visibly fading from her expression. She whispered that she had not intended it to progress to this extent. James repeatedly emphasized that we required one additional attempt. I approached her bed, maintaining a steady voice despite the slight tremor in my hands. Each instance of illness, every meeting I was unable to attend, and every client I lost. You were present, observing and documenting the impact of your actions on my situation. What kind of person would you describe yourself as? The ensuing silence was profoundly impactful. As more officers arrived on the scene, I could hear them informing James of his rights outside. Nina looked down at her hands, unable to make eye contact with me. I turned away from my sister-in-law and said, Detective, I am prepared to provide my formal statement at this time. The trial extended over a period of 3 weeks. Yet it seemed to span several years. Each day, I attended the courtroom proceedings, observing as the prosecution systematically presented their case against James and Nina. The evidence presented was substantial, including the bottles retrieved from James's office, comprehensive notes documenting each poisoning attempt, as well as recorded conversations and text messages outlining their plans. Their demeanor throughout the proceedings was particularly noteworthy. Nina, typically poised and self-assured, appeared diminished in her position within the defendant's chair. James was unable to meet my gaze, directing his attention to the floor while expert witnesses elaborated on the potentially lethal effects of the substances they had been utilizing. Dr. Phillips' testimony was notably critical. She delivered a thorough analysis, illustrating the gradual increase in dosages over time, which indicated a clear intent to inflict serious harm. The representative from the pharmaceutical company verified that James had illicitly obtained the compounds via a college acquaintance employed in their research department. The prosecutor asserted in her closing statement that the defendants exhibited a deliberate pattern of behavior. This incident transcended mere corporate sabotage. It represented a systematic effort to inflict harm upon Mrs. Bennett, characterized by a discernible escalation that posed a significant risk to her life. Upon the announcement of the verdict, I experienced no sense of joy, only a profound sense of relief. James and Nina were both convicted on several charges, including attempted murder and conspiracy. The judge's remarks resonated throughout the quiet courtroom. The deliberate nature of these actions perpetrated against a family member over an extended duration necessitates the imposition of the maximum sentence. I observed as they were escorted away in handcuffs, reflecting on how greed and jealousy had transformed two individuals I once trusted into something unrecognizable. A concerted effort to undermine me has compromised their business interests, reputations, and autonomy. 1 year following the trial, I found myself at the podium of the Nashville Business Leaders Conference, ready to deliver the keynote address. I found it ironic that this was precisely the opportunity Nina had sought to prevent me from attaining. The Henderson account, which she and James had been eager to acquire, resulted in the acquisition of several additional significant clients, thereby establishing my reputation as one of the leading marketing executives in the region. As I surveyed the audience before me, I began by emphasizing that talent and hard work are not the sole factors that determine success. It pertains to integrity and the establishment of authentic relationships founded on trust. I took a moment to allow my words to resonate. At times, the most significant challenges to our success may arise from individuals within our immediate circle. However, overcoming these obstacles ultimately contributes to our resilience and strength. Following my speech, a number of young professionals approached me to seek guidance. A woman, her eyes reflecting determination, inquired about how I had managed to maintain my composure throughout the ordeal. I highlighted the aspects that I could control and communicated them to her. I collected evidence, relied on my instincts, and remained resolute in my pursuit of my goals, undeterred by fear. Later that evening, I received an email from the Henderson client, confirming the renewal of their contract for an additional 3 years. I reflected on how differently circumstances could have unfolded had I not relied on my instincts that day during brunch. The local newspaper published a brief article that morning regarding Nina and James commencing their prison sentences. I have not reviewed it. Instead, I focused on the proposal for my latest client project, realizing that seeking retribution was not the most effective response. The focus was on progress and achieving success in spite of those who attempted to impede your advancement.